Well, hello everyone. I am Liz Arrington, and as the Managing Director of the GCV Institute and the architect of the Keystone Benchmarking Platform, I am on an industry advancement mission, which means after spending nearly 20 years in the industry, I'm absolutely thrilled to see that more CVCs are now playing critical roles in driving transformation and innovation by building specialized teams that can foster collaboration between the portfolio companies and the parent, and that also drive operational excellence for the unit. The Keystone research that we've done shows that approximately 35% of all CVCs and 65% of CVCs with assets under management of more than 300 million have established professional platform teams that operate in parallel with the investment teams and are really highly valued by startups for their ability to provide access to parent resources, to parent networks, and are a huge differentiator in many cases even for term sheets. And if you look at the VCs, probably about half of them have some form of platform team. They often look a little different than the corporate platform teams, where frequently they'll lead with more of a fund management and marketing focus, but then also offer post-investment resources in the form of marketing or talent or business development. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at, what's different for CVCs and, what's unique about the CVC platform model that's, critical to being able to power CVC longevity, scale, and impact. So I'm really excited to have representatives of both the operations side of the house and the business development side of the house. We have Joel Crixton, who is Managing Director and Head of Strategic Innovation Alliances for MSD Global Health Innovation Fund. And we have Elizabeth Granger, who is operating partner for PayPal Ventures, which is another resilient and highly global program. So I'd like to kick off the conversation by having each of you spend a few minutes introducing your programs and yourself. So, when were you established? How large is the program? What's your mission? And what is your personal role? So Elizabeth, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I run operations for PayPal Ventures. We are the global corporate venture arm of PayPal. We have been around for about 8 years and have a portfolio of just over 90 portfolio companies globally. More than half of our portfolio companies are outside of the US, and we're continuing to see lots of opportunity across the Middle East, Europe, Latin America. Our team is split across the Bay Area, New York, and London. I'm actually based here alongside two of our investors. The rest of the team is US based. So from an operations perspective, my team does basically everything that's not like sourcing new deals and making investment decisions. So we do the sort of 4 verticals that I split our work streams into is portfolio development. So both the kind of always on evergreen kind of platform offerings that we have for our portfolio companies, as well as running, helping our portfolio companies navigate PayPal for commercial opportunities. We run something called an advisory network where we have more than 60 executives across PayPal who are available for mentorship and other sort of advisory capacity roles for our portfolio companies, which is a great way to kind of bidirectionally give value. We've got reporting and analytics. We've got the marketing and the comm side, and then over the past sort of year or two, we've put more emphasis onto the PayPal connectivity side as well. So I have someone on my team who specifically focuses on making sure that the insights that we're getting, not just from our portfolio, but also from all of the other startups that we talk to. One of the things that we sort of we talk about a lot is we probably do 10 to 12 new investments each year, but that's just kind of the bottom of the funnel. The top of the funnel is 2,500 startups, and there's a lot of insights that we're getting from exploring a particular thesis, across all of those, even the investments that we don't make. And I think turning that into white papers, going to different and doing roadshows across the organization, there's a lot of value that we can give to the business at varying levels. So that's kind of how we're set up.
Okay, great.
Awesome, and great to be here. Liz, thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you as well. So MSD, known as Merck in the United States, is a large pharmaceutical company, biopharmaceutical company. We have 4 venture funds. I am in the Global Health Innovation Fund, which is a 15-year-old, $600 million evergreen fund. We essentially invest in all external technologies that touch the pharmaceutical business, but not the therapeutics themselves. So MSD has a separate dedicated fund for pharmaceutical investments. But if you think about the broader healthcare ecosystem that we exist in, there are many other types of capabilities, many other types of external technologies, innovations, emerging technologies that make our business and make our patients healthier, that we would like to have some sort of a relationship with beyond owning and operating, which we shouldn't be owning and operating as a pharmaceutical company. So I wear 3 hats. I lead all of our investor coverage for the commercial side of MSD. So everything that our brand teams are working on, challenges that relate to how we interact with clinicians and patients and gain access to real world data, et cetera. Those are the investments I make. I lead our enterprise coverage group, which is why I'm here today. That's really our platform team. So how do we connect our portfolio companies to MSD business leaders and try and create programs, demonstrate strategic value, particularly when it's not going to be a new drug. So it's a little interesting for us to think about. And then I also lead 2 international venture studios that we stood up last year. So one of those is in Singapore, supporting 12 markets across Asia Pacific, and one which we just came from is in Berlin, which is supporting Europe and the UK. So that's really our effort to try and make the fund more accessible to our MSD leaders outside of the US.
And you're a fairly lean team, right? You are.
Pretty lean team, sadly, too lean, yeah. So besides myself, we have one other person who's really running and driving this platform initiative that we started about 4 years ago. She is now managing 55 partnerships between our portfolio companies and MSD teams, which really is not a thing. It's not really, the investors help. She does an extraordinary job. We leverage other business development and alliance management teams inside the organization. But she ultimately is the air traffic control that knows where those opportunities are. I think, like you said as well, being able to offer portfolio companies some sort of a concierge service through a 70,000 person global pharmaceutical company is highly valued.
Very much so.
There just aren't enough of us. So our hope is to continue to build out that side of the house because it really has delivered a lot of value in a very short period of time.
And both of your programs were founded before platform teams became fashionable. But along the way, you've sort of managed to work your way to resilience. So can you talk a little bit about what point in the evolution of your programs you brought on board the operations and the portfolio development capability? Because I know you said that PayPal had been investing in an ad hoc way since 2010, but that there was a switch as the program became formalized.
Yes.
So maybe you can both talk a little bit about, kind of where you plugged in these new operating capabilities and business development.
Definitely, yeah. I think so. I've been with the team for about 4.5 years, and at that point, the portfolio was about 55, 60 companies. We were running everything still very much out of a spreadsheet, and I think the investors and the entire team, we sort of had like blinked and woke up and realized we were not a fund of 15 anymore. We were now a fund of like 60, and I think that it kind of got to that breaking point where we're like, oh, we need to put some professional rigor around how we manage all these different things. And so I spent probably the first 2 years or so really like building and sort of like building new processes and building new things that kind of would then eventually scale. But yeah.
Ours is a little different because the original remit of the fund, we've been around for 15 years, was to build new businesses for MSD. This idea of sort of technology-enabled or technology services that it's sort of funny to say out loud now, as a pharma company would sell to our customers. I think we realized in about 6 or 7 years, even though that was financially very successful, we were doing really well with our portfolio returns. We weren't really delivering any strategic value back to MSD. And so our team really grew out of this question of, if we're not the entity that seeds a pipeline of biotech preclinical assets, somebody else is doing that job. How do we show value back to MSD? And that became a very intentional exercise to say, one unique thing for us is we can support the entire value chain of pharma. So whether it's our research and development colleagues, whether it's our commercial colleagues, whether it's manufacturing, supply chain, IT, fill in the blank, many of those groups, as they think about their strategic priorities, face a challenge that requires external innovation as the solution. Let's tell a story about how venture capital can be that business development tool, not to learn, which is a very popular thing to say, there's some learning, but really to create a self-funding mechanism that says, let's experiment with these technologies in our hands, create real pilots, feed that information back to the mothership to say, you should keep partnering, this isn't what you thought it is, maybe this is so important you really do need to own it. And by the way, as a customer, we're creating value in these small companies. So as those companies exit, this becomes a self-funding mechanism to experiment with external technology. And that really took hold.
Yeah.
So I think that some of it's a little bit of an existential need to redefine our value prop to the org.
Yeah.
But it was also trying to get more granular on describing impact instead of just saying, we're venture to look around the corner and see what's new, right? That wasn't enough when we're not investing in science.
Right.
That might work
Not
for
the
that
core.
group. That doesn't work for us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think what I was talking about was sort of like how we were first building out our team and kind of that need on like the operational piece. But then we've had a new leadership team come in at PayPal over the past couple of years, and I think that the most recent years have been more focused on that kind of making sure that the new leaders across the business understand that strategic value. And I think there's definitely been a shift in a little bit how we're thinking about things. So yeah, I think very much resonates as well.
I know one of the kind of age-old problems for corporate venturing programs is how do you manage a shifting landscape of parent partners and stakeholders, and how and I think, Joel, let's start with you. Talk to us about your enterprise coverage model, because I think that's a really unique way that you have approached, particularly with a very lean team, distributing responsibility across the team.
I think in and of itself, it's very entrepreneurial in that we went to a lot of business leaders and said, you probably don't know who we are or that we even exist. You have a $600 million venture fund, and it's really our job to teach you how to use it. And the minute you start telling people there's money available, of course, you make friends relatively quickly. So that worked out pretty well. It's a never-ending stream of education. Really what our ask was to say, invite us into the room at the beginning of the ideation process. So there's a new therapeutic coming down the pike and there's going to be a challenge with this part of the patient journey, or you're trying to generate evidence to support a product in the market, but you don't know where to find the data. Or we're not here to say that the answer is necessarily a venture-backed startup, but with all the institutional knowledge of what we've seen, with all of our connectivity into the external environment, even if it's not a venture deal, we can connect you to our network, or we'll share that. And so we started out over the first 2 or 3 years really just trying to embed ourselves into work groups and very specifically saying, we are not here to be your digital experts. Mm-hmm. We're not here to be your innovation leaders. You've already got 17 teams that are doing that somewhere. Just let us in the room. And then we'll sort of prove to you the value of having GHI as part of these conversations. That has worked extremely well. That really, I would say the other thing is we went straight to the top, just because why not? So we went to the very senior most leaders and said, put us on your leadership teams, invite us into your work streams. And you'd be surprised how people say yes to that. And they just let us in. And then I think we proved our merits through those processes. So the downside of that is we now have an obligation to continually educate them and fill them in.
And to serve them.
And we don't have that many people, right? So we spend a lot of time, that's really where Susie spends a lot of her time on that education piece.
But I think you told me that you do have account assignments across all 9 members of the team, both the investment team and the business development team, for managing those relationships.
And that was intentional for 2 reasons. One, we had to create swim lanes so that people had specific responsibilities in order to know who their internal client was, if you think the investors specifically. We also had a lot of investors who loved to be the smartest people in the room and super strategic. And this new model was really the opposite of that. It was a bit of a servant leadership model, where you went in and said, I'll demonstrate I'm strategic over time, but I'm not showing up to be the expert. Okay. And that was a real culture shift for our investor group. So it really served 2 purposes, but it brought the investment team closer together because now we weren't debating whether you were super smart strategically or you were really telling the story of the business. These are what the needs are, and this is how I can address it through these types of technologies. And then it was just a conversation about whether it was a good investment or not. It wasn't a question about whether it was the right place to invest. And that created a lot of peace in the investment group too. So
Nice.
yeah, that was sort of intense.
It sounded like you've done something a little similar, haven't you? You've identified, you said, individual groups around the business that you're partnering with. How do you manage those?
Oh, yeah, we have. We sort of similarly have our investors cover different business units. Through our team, we track every single VP and above in the company, and we have an idea of have we interacted with them before? Are they part of our advisor network? How connected are we? And some of them, they might be in a role where there's sort of less natural fit. Others, we very much work to make sure that we're connecting with on a regular basis. And our team makes sure that we're very happy to do sort of joint team meetings, joint offsites, and kind of meet leaders where they are, in terms of do they want to talk? Like with some of our teams, we talk to them monthly and we have a conversation about pipeline. Others, it's a little bit more sporadic, but I think we are very actively trying to meet our leaders a little bit early and introduce them to our portfolio companies as early as we can, because where there are commercial opportunities, I think we find that there's a lot more traction when our leadership team feels that there's perhaps some a joint accountability in their success and potential for working together.
And do you potentially look to acquire, or is it?
We have done, so we have acquired out of the portfolio, but it's not necessarily something that we look to do. We don't invest for M&A, but given that our investments are often strategically relevant to PayPal, years down the line, it could be that we do.
Okay. And you said you occasionally would consider acquiring if it.
We would. We have over the last 4 years spent a lot more time with our R&D organization, not on the therapeutic side specifically an asset, but all of the adjacent technologies, particularly AI for drug discovery, improving the efficiency and productivity of clinical trials. Our traditional therapeutic investment group said, we're not super interested in covering that space. So we, of course, we're happy to grab it. And it has been a remarkably robust area of investment for us. So I do think our story could begin to shift where we are a little bit more in terms of strategic value. Some of those assets for sure could be M&A targets if in fact some of these pilots read out and those technologies do what we think they do,
Right.
which would be terrific for us. Yeah. We could add that to our story.
Another check.
Yeah.
Okay, if you put your portfolio management hats on for a minute, can you talk a little bit about what you track and measure and what performance you track and measure and report on and how you communicate it? Do you want to talk about both from a financial and a strategic perspective?
Yeah, of course. So from a financial perspective, we track and report on the standard sort of venture capital benchmarks around fund performance, and use benchmarks to compare our fund vintages to.
You're using Cambridge.
Yeah, exactly. And we send out every quarter after our sort of finance and accounting team close the books, we send out a set of 6 slides to the SLT, and just it's consistent, it's fairly straightforward, it doesn't really change quarter to quarter. And then we have also just started, last year was the first year that I did this, but we pulled together an annual report. So basically the first half is the 6 slides, but plus 2 or 3 more, a couple of deep dives into specific areas of the year, things that are maybe a bit more interesting. And then the second half is the strategic value that we've delivered. And so we have started tracking, basically I'm trying to track everything and seeing, where there's, see what sticks and see where there's interesting things to pull out. But I mean, it's, the obvious ones are companies that have done commercial partnerships with PayPal and kind of what the value of those are. It's advisor network introductions. It's also, how many people at PayPal have been exposed to a portfolio company that we've invested in. It's all kinds of different things like that. It's events that we've done. It's more of the marketing side of hits and shares through our LinkedIn page. It's all those kinds of things. So we sort of pulled together, 5 or 6 pages on that piece with some examples and sort of case studies of things that were particularly helpful or interesting. So that's it. And then we've distributed that again, just the one time so far, but hopefully doing it repeatably in the future will be easier.
And that would be to a wider audience than the SLT, or would that be still just the SLT?
We initially sent it to just the SLT, but then we used it as a way to kind of broker additional conversations across the business. So it's expanded its reach a bit beyond that. It's probably, overall made its way to about, 50 people at PayPal, I would say.
Yeah, I've seen people share the financial piece with the senior team, but then share more broadly
Definitely, yeah.
the other pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. So Joel, talk a little bit about how GHI measures performance, both on a...
So we have a CFO, COO who many of you may know, Dave Stevenson. So Dave does all of the financial reporting according to...
He calls himself the Chief Other Officer.
The Chief Other Officer. And so that piece has been running fine for 15 years. Dave interacts with senior finance folks. That's a relatively tight distribution in terms of who sees those results and gets that messaging. The harder part for us on the strategic value side is because it's not a therapeutic. So it's not a product that made it to some milestone in a clinical trial or achieved some level of sales. Depending on the part of the organization where a portfolio company has partnered with an MSD team, we have very specific guidelines